Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Playbook podcast. Probably the greatest podcast of all time, if you ask me, but I'm slightly biased. You right? I'm here today with someone that you might recognize. You know him, you love him. It's Joe LoCicero. How are you, Joe?
Great. How you doing today, Paul?
Good, man. Good to see you. It's been a minute.
Yeah, I know, brother. How you been?
I've been pretty good, man. Staying busy, working during the week, this on the weekends.
Awesome, man.
You know me, man.
Yeah, and this is kind of going to be a milestone podcast as, we'll share with the audience. This will be your final podcast with us.
That's right. So, let your tears out right now, and yes, I'll miss you guys. And it's been a journey, man. It's been interesting to say the least. Right?
Yeah, I guess I should rephrase that. This won't be your final podcast with us. This will, from moving forward, we'll start having podcasts without you because you were kind of running this at the helm. I know I was kind of in the beginning taking some. I got tied up. We were talking about kind of rotating them, but you kind of took the ball and ran with it. Yeah, man.
It's funny because we talk a lot about, or with other guests, not with yourself, but talk about kind of how it started and everything. And I always tell the story the same. I was like, well, Joe had this idea. He wanted to do this podcast. And for a while we couldn't get it off the ground because, just other things came first or whatever. And eventually we did it. And I'm just like, I think back to the first one that we did. And I think we did it. You can go back and watch it, the audience out there. But we did it over Zoom. But we were in the same office, but just in different rooms. And it's changed so much since then. And not just from the technical aspect, but also kind of my approach. When I prepped for that first one, which was just you and I was like, I scripted every single little thing I was going to say. And I was like, you got to hit this word, this word, this word. And now it's I'll just put 3 questions and then just see where it leads me. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, man. You got to, and you've done a hell of a job with it and definitely built the audience. So, we couldn't be more grateful for you kind of take the ball and running with it, all your hard work, and kind of thanks for everything you did to kind of get this show up running and starting to build that audience.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun for sure. At first I was I'm not sure how to feel about it. I did video stuff before, but not a whole lot of being in front of the camera, so it's definitely a different animal, but
usually behind it, right?
Yeah. So I think it's been a positive experience all around, man.
So why don't you tell the audience then, Paul? Because you kind of come in and if they do, review some of the earlier podcasts, you kind of, when you were here with us, you were in the marketing, kind of a marketing coordination position. We started this podcast and you obviously knew about real estate just from kind of, being in it and the grind, talking to realtors, taking listings live, things of that nature. But now with interviewing all these agents, what have you kind of learned from the Real Estate Playbook and, hosting all these agents and having them tell you their story?
Yeah, man. So like you said, that was kind of the idea behind the show as well, was it was going to be you and I co-hosts and having all these agents come on here who some of them are just starting, some of them have been performing at a high level. When we started, it was mostly people that were already at a high level. And your idea was kind of well, somebody needs to bring some levity to that because the audience, some of them might be agents and they understand what the heck's going on, what these people are talking about. But there's also some people that are tuning in and maybe they're consumers or maybe they want to be an agent at some point and they just don't know what the hell we're talking about. So
absolutely.
So you were like, well, Paul, you can kind of bring this fresh perspective and kind of guide the narrative when you start getting in all the lingo and that sort of thing. So
yeah, all our acronyms and and words that make sense, in our profession, but not really to the general public.
Exactly. So that's where I started, was very limited knowledge. And like you said, I had been working here already for some time, so I knew some things. And my mom was in the mortgage business, so I know some of that stuff as well. But really just going in not knowing what the hell was going on. So to answer your question, I guess the main things I've learned, and to anybody that listens to this, they know that I tend to repeat myself because the same kind of stuff comes up over and over on here. I guess the number one thing is, for consumers at least, you absolutely need a real estate agent, which is that might sound so obvious and silly, but I think if you don't know much about the real estate world, you might just think, you know everything from watching TV, or you might have a buddy who's a real estate agent or whatever. But there are so many damn moving parts that you just don't consider, that it's the real estate agent's job to know. You know what I mean? So I think that's definitely a big takeaway for me. On the other side of it, things that I learned, I'm still obviously not an agent myself, but things that I think agents probably take away from this is that you never really know everything. Like everybody still has struggles. I remember one of the earliest episodes, I think it was like number 10 or something like that. Chris was on here as the guest.
Okay.
And I mean, Chris, she's top of the crop, man. She knows what she's doing, right? It's Chris K-Fab right there. But she said something to me that stuck with me, which was like, because I was kind of gassing her up. I'm like, Chris, you know everything there is to know, man. She's like, Paul, every single day I find something that I didn't know before, and I learned something. And you just you got to stay humble. You know what I mean? Because
absolutely. And that's that's why she performs the way she does.
Yeah.
She's always, has that open growth mindset and never thinks that she knows it all.
And if you don't humble yourself, you will be humbled.
Absolutely. So it's easier to do yourself, so you don't have to, experience that life lesson.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of other things I learned along the way, I think. People could definitely go back and check out some of the older stuff, but a lot of it just has to do with like perseverance and being honest in your communication and not being too hard on yourself, I think, in general. And that's just from the real estate business side of things. From like what did I personally learn from doing this show? I definitely think it boosted my confidence. Like we were just talking about, me scripting everything when we first started, and now I can just go off the cuff. I mean, it's definitely a skill set, a muscle that I got to work, I feel. So I think that was a big plus for me. And then also I got to hone a lot of like my technical skills as well with the audio stuff and the editing and blah, 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 the boring stuff that nobody really cares about except for me. But
absolutely.
But it's been cool, man. It's been a ride. So.
Well, they say that a number one way to build self-confidence is through repetition.
Yeah.
So by you kind of doing those and kind of getting into practice and stuff, the more you did, the more confident you became.
Exactly.
And comfortable with it.
Yeah, definitely.
So let me ask you this, and I'm going to kind of veer off a little bit from the real estate, and obviously we can kind of come back to that, but this one I kind of want to focus more on you. There's a lot of people out there, I'm assuming, who probably are thinking about doing a podcast, whether it's in the real estate sector or not. What are some words of advice, since you've kind of been, co-hosting it and running it, that you'd give to them, and then also share your experience with it from just a podcast perspective outside of the real estate?
Yeah, definitely. So, like I said, when we first started, man, I was being so meticulous about every little thing. I wanted to be prepared so that, because I'd never done it before, so I wanted to make sure I have all these topics to talk about with my guests. I know every little thing about the guest. I'm planning the edits beforehand and all this other stuff. And you kind of got to throw all that out the window. Like, I definitely like to over-prepare. That way I'm ready when there's hiccups and stuff like that. But, man, the hiccups are going to come whether you're prepared or not. So I feel like it takes a lot of the stress off if you just go in, having a loose idea of what you want to cover. If there's something in the news, like when I do the solo ones, I'll make sure that I know what I'm talking about when I don't have a guest. But for the most part, if you just breathe and you're just comfortable with the guest, even better if it's somebody that you know, 9 times out of 10, it's going to go smoothly. So that'd be my advice for if you're going to be hosting the podcast. Outside of just hosting it, it's more work than I think people realize. So to have a team or people that can help you out is huge. There were definitely times where like I was doing a lot of it myself, which was no problem because that's what I was hired to do. You know what I mean? But Emily definitely helped me with booking guests, which she's doing right now too. You obviously did a lot of the hosting as well. Nick helped with some editing things, some social media stuff, which is huge because, like I just said, there's more that goes into it than people realize. So if you have the opportunity to get people to help you with it, I would definitely recommend that.
And is it more so obviously there's a lot of things that go into the technical background, trying to get it on all the sites, then boosting videos, chopping it up, things like that. But what about the consistency? Did that come into kind of play where just the discipline of ensuring that you had a video every week? Because, the number one thing with a lot of things in life is going to be consistency, and the fact that we never took a break from missing a podcast.
Right.
How did that kind of affect your life? Did it become too encumbersome, or once you kind of got in the routine, it was just like something that you did and became just the kind of norm?
Yeah, I think that's one of those things that is tricky about it, is staying consistent, because as any article or like other podcasts will tell you, if you want it to be even mildly successful, you have to be consistent. Like, I think even like some people in your circle, Joe, like maybe it was Jay Pitts or somebody that has a podcast. I would listen to those like early on, and they would say that like you just don't want to miss one. You don't want to miss one, which is huge. So as far as dealing with that, it was tricky at first, not for me because it was my primary focus, but any podcaster will tell you, like I hear this on other podcasts, one of the hardest parts is coordinating with guests, like especially real estate agents where they're so dang busy and other things come first, clients come first. This is kind of an afterthought for them, which I can appreciate. So that's definitely a tricky part of it, is coordinating time and place with your guests. It was easier when we were doing it kind of over Zoom at one point because they could do it from their home or their office or whatever. But once we kind of switched to this format, it became even trickier. So I would say that's a part that you'll have to hone, is making sure that you plan in advance for schedule mix-ups like that. And then another thing that definitely helped is sometimes like recording more than one in one sitting. Like today is a perfect example. Like I did one with John earlier, and then obviously you and I are here now. That helps because now you have a buffer for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever it might be.
Absolutely.
So that definitely helps. So I don't think it really got overwhelming at any point. Partially because I just like doing it as well. But there's definitely kinks that you have to work out and scheduling things that you have to overcome. But,
Yeah, I mean, that comes with life,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what would you say are some of the skills that and I can kind of touch on it too. I just kind of want to hear your opinion first. But some of the skills that you would think somebody would need for a podcast, and what are some of the skills that you might have developed or further developed throughout this journey of the podcast?
Yeah, it's a funny question to answer because I don't want to stroke my own ego or anything like that. But I've definitely gotten this from like other guests or even like people that haven't been on the show but just watch it or whatever, and they're just like, complimenting my emceeing, my hosting abilities or whatever. And I'm like, so I started to get in this pattern where I'm like, well, I wonder what that is. Like, I guess I am good at it. So where does that come from? And I think just in my regular life outside of this show, I just like talking to people, and I can kind of gel with a lot of different personalities and types of people, which it dates back to my youth, I suppose. I was around a lot of different kinds of people, and I just like hearing people's stories, and I think I'm just genuinely interested in what people have to say. So I think that definitely translates to this format.
Not to interrupt, we can keep going. But I would say that's one thing that I think you had in the beginning, which made you a great host, but something that I think you further developed and have almost mastered. It's not necessarily the talking, but I mean, you touched on it, talking to people, listening to their stories, but it's the listening aspect.
Yeah.
Most people want to always be heard. So you're cutting people off. You're not letting people finish their sentence. If they're trying to talk to someone, you can kind of go a little bit deeper than they're just kind of sticking to their own personal narrative.
Yeah.
But one thing that you were great at is always listening and then allowing the conversation to flow without you interrupting. So that way you could get the dialogue and really get the agent's story out.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually probably harder than talking is the listening portion, because
it is.
You want to make sure that if I'm asking a follow-up question, it has to do with whatever you just said instead of just like the next thing I have written down. You know what I mean? It has to flow. And people will catch me a lot of times on this show where I'm just like, what the hell was I about to say?
That's why I'm over here taking notes.
Yeah, because I'm just like, I'm listening and like, oh, I have a question about this, I have a question about that. And I'm not writing it down or anything. I'm just trying to bank it up here. Then when the person's done talking, I'm like, sometimes I will forget because I have so many things going in my head. But definitely that's a big aspect of it, is listening, because you want it to feel like a conversation. That's what it should be. It shouldn't be like, news interviews have their merit, but that's not what this is. So definitely, I think it lets the guests shine too when you kind of bounce off what they're saying instead of just trying to pigeonhole them into answering just the questions that you have. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And another thing that I noticed that I think was a great attribute of you is the tonality. Like, you kind of raise the energy when it needed to, you kind of bring it down when you also need to. You kind of mirror the guests, but you wouldn't be an exact mirror of them. So that way, if somebody was kind of going really fast, you kind of brought it down. If somebody's going too slow, you kind of brought it up.
Right.
And I think that's a skill set that you developed that you maybe weren't even aware of. Subconsciously, you're just kind of programming, hey, I know what the audience needs. I know what we need to do. I need to get this conversation going quicker. I need to get this conversation going slower. And just the tonality and, being clear and kind of just your talking points, I think really made it for an easy listening and why we were able to build such a big audience.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. We couldn't have anybody else to, better to kind of get this thing off the floor, and everything that you've done. So let's talk about what's kind of going on with Paul now. What's next? So I know you have a company, you're with a company now, I believe, called Fairmore as a marketing coordinator.
Far more, yes, sir. So it's a video production company. Really small team, like 10 of us, I think. I was just talking to John about it. Which I kind of like. That was something that I really liked about 54 as well, especially when I first started. Obviously, we've grown a lot over the years. But just like that feeling of like that ragtag group where like everybody kind of knows their role and kind of fits in a spot.
Desk in the garage.
Yeah, I'm kind of going off on a tangent there, but
No, it's good.
so yeah, it's a video production company, and honestly, man, I don't think that I would have looked at a job like this if it wasn't for sort of the experience that I had here. Like for people that don't know, I've probably talked about it on here before, but I started doing CMAs. I don't even know if you maybe remember that, Joe.
I do. I actually remember what you wanted to do in college when you told me.
Yeah.
You're part-time, you're going to in politics because your goal was, I believe, to be a politician.
Yeah, so that's definitely changed.
kind of took a U-turn there.
No kidding.
Or I should say a fork in the road.
Yeah, so Joe interviewed me, and then so I was working under Annie for a while, who's been on here as well, and then freaking COVID happened. Freaking COVID. I'm right. COVID. And then we were partnered with Zillow, so yada yada yada. Zillow closed down operations, and then you guys brought me back as marketing, and I was just doing general marketing stuff for a while there. But then we wanted to start building out a lot more video things, so I was helping out with that, and then a lot of the technical stuff for like meetings and stuff like that. Where was I going with this? Right. So
how it got you to the looking at your job there with
yes. So I had like a creative experience with it, not professional experience with video stuff. So once I had the opportunity to start work on that here, I realized like this is something that I really enjoy. I don't know if it's just because I'm just a technical nerd or if there's something about video that I just really enjoy. Maybe a little bit of both. So,
you have a unique, I think, skill set because there's few who like to be like, for instance, I don't know if I have a passion for podcasts. I like to talk and I like to kind of host. So I have a passion for the hosting, let's say, and hearing people's stories, somebody listening, but I have no passion for behind the scenes making this what it is.
Yeah.
On the flip side, there's a lot of people like, let's say Nick, for instance, who probably has a passion for doing behind the scenes, but he's probably not too motivated, him or Emily, to kind of do a podcast and sit here and be the audience. But you're kind of that unique hybrid where you actually enjoy doing both, which is a unique skill set and I think has a massive, value proposition in today's marketplace.
Thanks, man. I think part of it has to do with me being slightly a control freak as well.
That probably definitely has something to do with
maybe
that.
a little bit, right?
Rose can attest to that.
Yes, exactly. Love you, Rose. So my thing was when I heard about the opportunity at Farmer, I was definitely intrigued because it's a marketing role, which obviously I have experience with from here, but the company themselves is video production. So if you don't know what that is, they make commercials, short films, documentaries, brand films, all kinds of stuff. And I was like, okay, that sounds kind of cool. And I'm looking at their portfolio. Okay, they worked with like the Lightning and Tico and like some of these other big brands like Geico and Samsung and stuff. I'm like, okay, that's kind of awesome, right? So
a couple steps up from 54, right?
I mean, in a sense, I suppose it's just different.
I get it.
So I was interested and I took the role and it's been really cool, man. So for people that don't know, like I've been doing that during the week and doing this on the weekends. So I'm still around at 54 and got to stay in touch with all you guys, which has been awesome. But I'm really digging the new role. Got to do a lot of cool stuff like just this. Well, I don't actually probably shouldn't say, but we got to wrap a really cool shoot this week for like a really big company with like a pretty big actor as well, which was kind of cool.
That's awesome. And are you hands-on? Are you getting to meet?
Sort of. Like they're kind of transitioning me into doing some more production stuff. But as far as like what it's been so far, I think it's been maybe 3 or 4 months I've been there now, and it's been like we redesigned the whole website, been doing a lot of like email marketing stuff, just kind of like ramping up our marketing efforts because like I said, it's a really small crew, but the skill level is there, and it's one of those things where we can definitely scale a business and kind of get some more of those big fish clients, which I'm really excited about. But
that's awesome, man.
But yeah, so it is that like you were just talking about my skill set or whatever, and my having interest in the whole process, and that's exactly what I've been able to do is like kind of see everything from start to finish, like planning these big shoots, doing them, and then editing them, and then sharing them, and yada yada yada. So it's just been really cool, man. And I don't think I would have delved into this had it not been for me being able to kind of explore this.
And I always feel, and I tell it to the agents all the time, or anybody for that matter, I think the best training you have is by experience.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think instead of kind of reading about it or learning about it, you actually just kind of getting your feet wet. And like you said, starting from podcast 1 to now 56.
Yeah.
You know, how far you've come allowed you to pick up that skill set to kind of start that next chapter of your life.
For sure, man. Yeah. And I definitely appreciate it. Like it's one of those things too, where you look back and you're like, if Joe hadn't come to me with this idea, would I have ever kind of gone down this path? You know what I mean? Or not, but it just happened organically that way. And I'm grateful for that, man. So.
Oh, no, we're grateful for everything that you did for us here. And, you know, we greatly appreciate you. Obviously, you're missed. People still talk about you.
Oh, yeah, man. I still see
you know, your legacy will continue on. So as far as kind of like foremost a marketing coordinator, what are some things like from, I guess, carrying on the podcast, or how can I phrase this? Like if you were to make any changes with it, what do you think are some things that we could potentially possibly do moving forward, or something that would get the clientele more engaged? Or maybe what were you noticing that maybe the audience was craving that we might have been leaving on the table?
Yeah, I'm not too sure as far as feedback from the audience. Like I talk to people that listen to the show, and it's generally positive feedback. Like I don't think I've had anybody suggest anything since the early days, really, which funny enough, John Hudson was one of those people that we talked about this on his episode, but he was like, I said to him, John, you were one of the first people that ever came to me and was like, hey, I listen to every episode. You should start asking your guests this question. And it was just something as simple as like when you have top producers on, asking them like what their secret sauce is or whatever. Just little things like that. So I think we've got it to a good place now where like the questions are very meaningful. People get a good amount of value out of listening to them, especially if you're in the real estate business. I have a lot of people too that come to me that aren't in the business that still listen, like just consumers. And I'm like, why do you listen? Like, what is it that you find interesting about it? And some people do listen because like they're friends of family or mine or whatever. But some people are just like, well, you guys talk about the market a lot. You talk about things that you don't really get from like news articles and that sort of thing, because it's people that are, for lack of a better term, boots on the ground, like living it every single day. So I think focusing on that should definitely be a big thing. Keeping the market, even though sometimes like the real estate agents are kind of tired of talking about it because they talk about it every single day. It's definitely good for people to hear that from the horse's mouth on this show. So I think that'd be good.
So what I'm hearing is like humanizing the experience rather than just cut and dry black and white real estate.
Yeah, thinking about like what people want to hear, I guess. I mean, that's really an oversimplification, I guess, but it makes sense. And then the other thing too that I've kind of liked that we started doing is like, for example, Erin Bayer was just on here a couple weeks ago, and she's not an agent, but she's a loan officer. So she's able to offer this different perspective that people aren't used to hearing on here. So I think doing stuff like that can be cool as well, whether it be loan officers or, I don't know, title officers or even office staff, like people like that. I think it's good to hear from every once in a while.
Absolutely. I feel that too, like inspectors, title insurance, homeowners insurance, whatever it might be.
Yeah, and those are the ones where I learn the most too, because talking to a bunch of different real estate agents, like you kind of hear the same things every once in a while, but getting those fresh perspectives, you tend to learn something. So I think it's cool.
That's awesome, man. So is there anything else you kind of want to say in wrapping up here with your final episode that you kind of want the audience to know, or any tidbit of information you'd like to know before I kind of go ahead and do the outro?
Yeah. I guess, thanks for listening would be the number one thing. Sometimes you feel like when you're recording these, at least, that you're kind of doing it like in a vacuum. You're like, who's going to hear this? You know what I mean? And then, the numbers have been pretty good, pretty consistent as well, which I really appreciate. That means that, the same groups of people are listening week after week. And that means a lot. So I appreciate everyone who has listened and or watched. Secondly, anyone who's ever been on the show, you know who you are. I appreciate you because, like I said earlier, it's kind of a pain to track people down and get them to appear to do this.
Yes.
So it definitely means a lot. And obviously, we're not paying you to come on the show. So taking time out of your busy schedules to do this definitely means a lot as well. I said it already, but thank you, Joe, for having this idea in the first place and kind of allowing me to flex train my muscles over time. It's been a big deal for me. Emily, shout out to Emily for kind of being patient with me when this was my main focus and we had other things to worry about.
Yes.
Rose for just being a source of inspiration early on. I think that's pretty much it, man. Yeah. So, hey, I'll miss you guys.
Well, yeah. Well, I want to say, we couldn't, like I said in the beginning, thought of anyone better to kind of do this podcast other than you. I'm super proud of you kind of watching your growth. I mean, episode 56, we've made it over a year.
Yeah, dude.
And that consistency is a milestone in itself.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, will skip a week here, do whatever. And even when I kind of got busy in my things or, closing out the Zio contract or kind of got busy with some other things I was working on, you kind of took the ball, ran with it, no problem, and ensured that we stayed with that consistency. So that I'm forever grateful, man. I wish you the best of luck. I'm super excited for you at your new position. Sounds like you're, working with an awesome group of people, awesome clientele. And obviously you always have a door here. We love you, man. We appreciate everything that you've done. You were a source of inspiration for the show, really kind of getting it up and running. And I know, like I said, everybody still talks about you. You'll be highly missed, and definitely don't be a stranger.
Absolutely, man. You can't get rid of me just yet. So.
Not yet. So why don't you go ahead and kick that outro out, Paul?
Thanks, Joe. Everyone out there, you know the drill. Thank you for listening and watching, whatever you might be doing. If you're watching, go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel. What the heck are you doing if you're not subscribed by now? My God, a year later and you're still not subscribed. Shame on you. If you're listening on the audio, go ahead and like or whatever you got to do on there. As always,
need that script.
Yeah, right. As always, follow on the social medias at The Real Estate Playbook. We're not going anywhere, guys. Jump back in next week. And as always, thank you for listening. I've been Paul. Take care.
Take care.
Theme music.